Hello and welcome to the Sports Fix. I'm your host Cameron Bunch alongside Maddie Panazzo and Sean McFarland. This is our first week with Maddie Panazzo and show, so we hope you guys are back and listening, and we thank you so much for listening. We have a jam-packed show, and we have a lot to get to, but before we get to, I'd like to introduce my co-host. First, Sean McFarland, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Glad to have Maddie back here.
Hello.
And of course, Maddie Panazzo, first show back in the podcast since converting over to this podcast, so...
Hello. How's everyone doing?
We're going to jump right into things and start with some Bearcat football. The Bearcats were in action this past Saturday against the University of Incarnate Word Cardinals. They came away with a 59-7 victory over UIW, moving them to 3-1 in conference and 3-2 overall, so that takes them over the 500 mark. The Bearcats scored 52 points in the first half, and we'll talk specifics, but they had 3 interceptions, one by Mikel Everett, PJ Hall, and one returned by Collins Okecha for a touchdown. That would pretty much put the game away late, and by halftime, we had just obliteration of what was a successful defense and offense. So with that, we'll run down some statistics in just a second, but Sean, I want to get your thoughts on kind of what you saw in the first half.
Yeah, it was definitely the game that Sam Houston needed, having had to come back in the second half for the past couple weeks. It was good to see them have that blowout, almost victory already sealed up at halftime. And all 3 phases of the game, offense, defense, and special teams, are really on point. So it was just good to see the win for Sam Houston.
The Bearcats had a total of 596 offensive yards. For Incarnate Word, they had 177. At the end of the first quarter, the Incarnate Word Cardinals just had 7 total of offensive yards, so defense was running on all cylinders. Some statistics, individual statistics: Jeremiah Briscoe, 6 of 10 for 118 yards, 1 touchdown. Jared Johnson, 8 of 9, 168 for 2 touchdowns. He was sacked once, and then Don King got some action in midway through the third quarter and kind of really slowed things down for the Bearcats. But potentially we were looking at 110 to 120 snap games the way the offense was moving. So, but of course things were slowing down, and Coach Keeler, a very high-class guy, didn't really, potentially we could have put up over 100 points, but that's not what the football team is about. On the ground, the Bearcats were led by Remus Bulmer, who actually checked into the game late. He went 17 carries for 98 yards and 1 touchdown, but we had 4 rushing touchdowns, one by Remus Bulmer, Corey Avery, Jalen Overstreet, and Donovan Williams. So we had Stephen Hicks got in there, and then Don King and Jeremiah had rushes for loss. But considering what our rushing game did, our receiving core was absolutely tremendous. Gerald Thomas, 5 catches for 63 yards. Ladarius Brown, 4 catches for 115. Jedediah Lewis, 2 for 26, and it just goes on. It's just crazy to see what the receiving core did. So, Matt, if you want to jump in the conversation and just kind of, talk a little bit about what your expectations are for this weekend against Abilene Christian and what the receiving core has done really for the Bearcats this year.
I'd have to say we've been pretty dynamic in both the passing and running game, and that's been awesome to see our Bearcats really do outstanding in. So.
We went on to special teams before we look at Abilene Christian for this weekend. Luke Somberga sets the all-time Sam Houston record for point after attempts after he kicked 8 successful point after attempts on Saturday. He sets an all-time record for 172 point after attempts. That's a lot of touchdowns in 3 years. So the previous record was set back in 2012 by Miguel Antonio, who's with 171. So congratulations to Luke Somberga on setting the all-time record. We're going to turn our attention now to the Southland standings. The Bearcats have 1 loss. They're currently 3-1 in the Southland, but Maddie Panazzo is going to give you some numbers for the top teams in the Southland Conference.
Hope y'all are ready, because about a bunch of numbers are about to come your way. All right, with McNeese State, we got 5-0 overall and 4-0 in conference. In second, we have Central Arkansas with 3-2 overall and 3-0 in conference. Sam Houston State, 3-1 in conference. Southeastern, or SLU, whatever y'all want to call it, right behind them with 2-1. And yeah.
So important numbers, because these are 2 teams, two out of the top 3 teams Sam Houston's going to see on the road. We'll see McNeese State in Lake Charles and then UCA at the end of the season. So still lots of football to play, but important numbers to watch those 2 teams. We're rooting for other teams because Sam Houston has that 1 loss against Lamar, so it's going to be super detrimental for the Bearcats to root for the other teams playing against McNeese State and UCA, but definitely going to take it 1 game at a time. So the Bearcats will be in action this Saturday in Abilene. They'll make the trip up Friday. About a 5 to 6 hour bus ride. I'll be going up with the team. It's a weird stadium and a weird environment. There's nothing really out west in Abilene, but they do play at a high school stadium. Abilene Christian is currently planning on building a stadium, and they're in the works. So that stadium won't be done until next season. So they play at Abilene High School, and then Abilene is a team that beat SFA potentially, and SFA stands are a 1-5 team, but of course we know that SFA talent is not that. So this is a potential team to watch out for, not only because they have the talent. It's a weird situation. It's just one of those games that you got to potentially put your mindset in. So with that, we're going to go with our keys to the game for this weekend. We'll start with Sean McFarland. So Sean, what are your kind of expectations or feeling about just going on the road and playing where, you know, a lot of people are not big fans, but respectively, ACU is a potential team that can knock off Sam Houston?
Yeah, definitely. They did just lose to Lamar 44-28 this past week. They gave up 347 rushing yards to Cade Harrington, the Lamar running back. He ran all over us, but 347 yards. This kid ran over them. I think the key for us is just keep running the ball. We have a running back by committee here at Sam. I like to see all 3-4 of the guys start just getting in, pounding the ball, and keep getting first downs, and first downs lead to touchdowns.
All right, with that, we're going to turn to Maddie. Maddie, what do you think is going to be the key or keys to the game for Sam Houston to pick up a win on the road?
I think it's really easy for players to get in their heads when you come off such a big win. So I think we just need to keep that momentum up, keep the same mindset, and just remember what their ultimate goal is, and that's to win a conference championship.
Sean and I talked about last week how Sam Houston has been really struggling to set the tone early in the game. They've been more of a second-half team, but we saw the complete opposite this past weekend against Incarnate Word. So my two keys of the game is starting off early and finding the long ball for the offense. And, you know, with the two-quarterback system set, Jeremiah Briscoe and Jared Johnson just continue that momentum and striking early first and not really slowing things down for output, potentially letting Abilene Christian to stay with them. So I think it's going to be a close game. Abilene Christian will put up a few touchdowns, if that, but I think pressuring the quarterback and just starting early. All right, now we turn our attention to the Sam Houston State women's soccer team. They were in action over the weekend in Natchitoches, Louisiana. They took on Northwestern State, but lost a heartbreaker in double overtime. Maddie Pedazzo is going to talk more about it. So, Maddie, just kind of give me the rundown of what happened late down the stretch.
All right, so coming in to our second overtime, we had about 10 seconds left, and for our team, I would just say we get really excited, so we sometimes think that we just have it in the bag, and to really push through with those last 10 seconds or just the last amount of minutes, that's what our team needs to do. But throughout the game, we just needed to really work on playing personnel. We have really fast players, and so they like long balls, and we also like people who like to play with the ball at their feet. So it's just identifying which player you're going to play with and keeping that chemistry going, because that can really throw off how good or how great we're going to do throughout the game. So that was just unexpected. We were expected to win that game. So
the Bearcats finish up the road trip with a 2-1 record. They return home this Friday and Sunday to Pritchett Field. You can catch more information on GoBearcats.com. But before we move to volleyball, we're going to look at the Southland standings in a tight race. SFA leads the conference by just 1 point. They're 4-0-2 in conference, followed right behind them by Abilene Christian at 4-1-1. And then there's a three-way tie with Southeastern Louisiana, Houston Baptist, and then Sam Houston at 4-2. But right behind Sam Houston is Central Arc at 3-2-1. So, you know, you're looking at potentially 6 schools that are potentially one game back within each other, and that's kind of just the way the Southland Conference has been the past couple of years. It's been tighter and tighter, no matter how close it gets. So, kind of with that, what are you kind of expecting for Friday? Just kind of returning home for Friday and Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon.
I'd say returning to Pritchett and being on our home field, we'll have the advantage of not have been on the road. We'll have our own fans there. We'll be playing where we practice all the time, and I think we'll get our momentum back and our just enthusiasm back for the game as we're playing at home. So I definitely think we're going to come out with 2 wins, and that's not just being biased because I'm a soccer player, but I definitely think these next few games are going to be exciting.
So the Bearcats will be back in action Friday night at Pritchett Field. They'll take on Southeastern at 6:30, and then they'll be back Sunday to take on Nichols at 1 p.m. You can check GoBearcats.com for more information and scheduling for the women's soccer team. Okay, moving on to Sam Houston State women's volleyball. The volleyball team was in action this past week. They were on the road this past Thursday. They took on Incarnate Word. They swept Incarnate Word this past Thursday, and then they lost to Abilene Christian in a 5-setter. The Bearcats will finish up their road trip tomorrow in Beaumont to take on Lamar. They beat Lamar to open up their conference play 3-1, and then they'll be back home in Johnson Coliseum Saturday, October 17th at 2 p.m. So you can watch them play on on Saturday at 2 p.m. But before, we're going to look at the conference standings in volleyball. Right now, the Bearcats sit at 4-2 in conference play. Texas A&M Corpus Christi is leading the Southland at 6-0, followed by SFA at 5-1, Central Arkansas at 6-2, and then Sam Houston at 4-2, tied with Abilene Christian. So a crucial match for them tomorrow. Lamar is currently 2-3, but that match on Saturday is definitely going to be detrimental for them. They'll be back home, and you can check for more scheduling. You can check GoBearcats.com. Okay, so Maddie Panazzo writes for the Houstonian. She got a phone interview with Michelle Griffith, the team captain for the Bearcats. A young team, no seniors on the roster, but Michelle Griffith, the captain for Sam Houston. Maddie Panazzo caught up with her. So, Maddie, what did Michelle Griffith kind of had to say about this weekend and what their expectations are right now in the season?
Coming off from a loss, Michelle had some really good things. Well, still positive things to say about her team. One thing that she made clear was that her team needs to just keep playing their game, and they need to play as if they don't have any pressure. And she feels that that's when her team will really be successful, and just keeping a positive mentality, especially as they're on the road. She expects a lot of good things coming up this week, so you guys should stay tuned.
So the Bearcats, once again, will finish up their road trip tomorrow in Beaumont, and then they'll be back home in Johnson Coliseum on Saturday to take on UCA, an important, crucial Southland match. Last but not least, women's tennis. The Bearcats were in Natchitoches at the Northwestern State Invitational over the weekend. Maddie Mortimer and Emma Barkovich reached the finals of the number 4 singles, and Fabian Gitwart and Mila Wanakovich both won the back draw of the number 1 and number 3 singles to highlight action for Sam Houston's women's tennis team over the weekend. The Bearcats saw 7 out of 8 teams compete in Southland Conference, which is going to be super important. Head coach Jim Ciano said, overall this weekend was another step forward. There were some very good wins, and most of the losses were close and hard-fought battles. All right, now we turn our attention to college football. Big news in college football world. Steve Sarkisian, the head coach of USC, was fired today. He was relieved yesterday, but after reports of special teams showing up to special teams meeting with alcohol under his breath, and reports from assistant coaches and players that Steve Sarkisian was drunk during the Arizona State game on September 26th was broadcasted nationally on television. But previously, the altercation was that Steve Sarkisian was drunk, and he was on his medication at a donor event early before the season started in August. So the big news is that he is fired and he is relieved of his duty. The reason why he was relieved, obviously, is because you can't show up for a college football game drunk. All kind of things set aside, is it's really upsetting for someone to have an alcohol problem. I mean, you can't put your alcohol in a job. If you can't really put it, set it aside, then you have a problem. And obviously that's something that he needs to take care of, because it's a serious situation, and alcoholism and being pretty much addicted to alcohol is serious. So before we get to scores, what are your thoughts on the whole situation on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I remember whenever the first altercation that really came out back in that donor meeting, I had kind of said that if he would get it all straightened up, they could kind of just throw it under the rug if they were winning. Well, now that they're sitting at 3-2 and more altercations have come up, USC really had no other choice than to get rid of him. I thought it was actually pretty quick, though, since on Monday or on Sunday they gave him the leave of absence, but all of a sudden now they fired him. I hope he gets well, because it is a serious issue. But it also was that the team was not producing on the field, being sitting at 3-2 and 1-2 in their conference. It really could have been a lot different if more altercations had not been coming up.
So USC head coach Steve Sarkisian is fired and is pretty much done at USC. He has that's a big issue. Kind of not talking in terms of football, but just kind of a standpoint of being aware of your friends and having alcohol. It is addiction. It is just like taking any drugs. Once you found of it, it's really easy to get your hands on it, and it can be a big problem. So for those fans listening out there, just kind of mind it that sometimes you're looking around yourself. Sometimes it can take just one person, letting your friend know and saying, hey, look, this is a serious matter and you need help. There's resources out there, and there's rehab and counseling centers. So just kind of keep an eye out for the people around you, because it can be a serious matter. But kind of on the football standpoint of doing your job, Maddie, what is kind of your take about just being overall of just kind of being at a football game or having like a coach? Can you imagine just having like a coach of a team, no matter what level it is, pro, college, or a peewee, being drunk at a game?
I think you just kind of question if your coach is really for you or not. It's hard to have a goal in mind when the person who's supposed to be leading your team isn't on the same page as you, and someone with a really serious problem, such as USC's coach. I'd say they did the right thing by letting him go.
I mean, and that's the only thing you really could do is, letting him go back to square one and getting him A-okay in his personal life and getting all that straightened out. So we wish Steve Sarkisian the best of luck, and USC Trojans a tough situation in the middle of the season, but it's just a weird situation. So one more story before we get to the scores. Sean's going to give you the headline for the other story that we're going to talk about before we get to Week 6 scores.
Yes, the University of Florida Gators quarterback Will Grier has been suspended for 1 year for violating NCAA rules. He tested positive for a performance-enhancing substance that was found in an over-the-counter supplement. The suspension carries a 1-year suspension. That does not mean that he will be able to start until Week 7 of the next year. So he is out for a full year, not just for the rest of the season. He would have redshirt sophomore status at that time. Grier, he's been having a monster season so far, getting Florida all the way up into the top 10 in the rankings. This is a big blow for a surprising SEC team to be up there at the top.
And it's just really sad that a quarterback would take performance-enhancing drugs. And we talk about it all the time about how the NCAA has tightened up on PED performance, whether that be steroids or any type of drug that would enhance your ability to perform better. And we talk about the natural being of the sport. Well, you consider it cheating, because if a guy is going to take steroids to be faster and stronger, then we pretty much, the NCAA puts random tests at the end of college football games. And I've seen it firsthand at the end of the game last year between any college football game. You'll have the NCAA rep say, hey, look, you need to go take a P test, and we'll test your P if it tests positive. And there's no fine line. And I think that this kind of story is very seldom for a quarterback to play in. I'm glad he caught it, because if he continues that, then that carries from college over to the NFL. So sad to see, but the Florida Gators are in a tricky situation. So all right, we're going to talk about some key games in college Week 6. Thanks, starting off with Mr. Sean McFarland. Sean, what do you got?
All right, I got the Michigan Wolverines with Jim Harbaugh taking on then ranked number 13 Northwestern, shutting out Northwestern 38-0. This Michigan Wolverine team has been on fire since their Week 1 loss against Utah, losing 24-17. They have won 5 straight games, including 3 of those being shutouts. 38-0, 28-0, 31-0. The other 2 wins, 28-7, 35-7. This defense is on fire and has already gone down as one of the top defense to ever play in college football just by these few weeks that we have seen.
So a big momentum shift for Jim Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, who's was previously quarterback at Michigan and knows the Big Blue. They have a big game we'll talk about later against Michigan State. College Game Day will be in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for the rivalry. We'll get to that game in just a bit. The past weekend, the Texas Longhorns were in a deep, deep hole after they were started off the worst start since 1956 in Longhorn history. Before this week, they were 1-4, and they needed a big win, and they came out on top against number 10 Oklahoma Sooners. They came away with a 24-17 victory. The Longhorns had 368 offensive yards, but really the story was the defense that really stepped up. They had a 14-3 leading into halftime, and then they sealed the deal down the stretch. It was kind of ridiculous to kind of see what the Longhorns had on the rushing attack. 313 rushing yards for the Longhorns. You got to see a lot of young, talented players that you're going to see a lot more of from the Longhorns, and you have to be happy if you're Charlie Strong. We talked about the Longhorns last week, how this game was going to be super big. Both of us went with the Sooners, but I was very surprised. I knew this team was very capable of beating OU. I just didn't know if they had it in them to kind of really upset a team that was unbeaten.
Yeah, and my other game would be the Tennessee Volunteers going and upsetting Georgia Bulldogs, but put a little asterisk next to there. Georgia loses their Heisman favorite on the team, Nick Chubb, with a gruesome PCL tear. He'll be out for the rest of the season. That's definitely a top 3 Heisman pick around the league. And Georgia had a big lead going, or a lead 24-17 at half, then only scored 1 touchdown second half as Tennessee went on to win 38-31.
All right, Maddie, what was your game of the week for college football week 6?
Well, I can't be on this podcast if I'm not talking about TCU and Kansas State trailing off, or going into the second half. The Horned Dogs were down 35-17.
All right, now we're going to turn to Maddie Panazzo. Maddie Panazzo, what was your game of week 6 for college football?
Definitely the TCU and the Kansas State game. Going into the second half, the Horned Frogs were down 35-17, but came back and ended up winning the game 52-45.
Last game of college football, we turn our attention to NFL. The Washington State. What's our name? All right, last game before we turn our attention to NFL. Washington State beats Oregon in overtime 45-38, and that gives Oregon their second loss. Fault for the quarterback for the Washington State went 50 of 74 for 505 yards and 5 touchdowns. A big win for Washington State, but a more crucial loss for Oregon because that puts them at 2 losses for the season. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to the NFL. All right, now we turn our attention to NCAA Week 7. Sean's going to give you the top 10 rankings for the AP Top 10 poll, and he's going to give you his game for the week.
All right, AP Top 10. Number 10, Alabama. Number 9, Texas A&M. 8, Florida. 7, Michigan State. 6, LSU. 5, Clemson. 4, Utah. 3, TCU. 2, Baylor. And 1 remaining at the top, Ohio State. My game of the week will be Alabama visiting A&M in College Station. I expect another big offensive shootout from these two teams. Their defenses are all right, but their offenses, I think A&M's going to be able to get the offense going a little bit more than Alabama's. I think Alabama's offense is a little bit slower and not as threatening as it has been in the past. And I think A&M's offense just keeps getting stronger and stronger as the weeks go on. So my pick will be A&M over Bama, but it will be close there at Kyle Field.
I'm also going to take the Aggies just because A&M's coming off a bye week. They're well rested. Kyle Allen has an undefeated record, and he's well rested, so I think that's going to play a big part. Alabama just came off a big game, so they're going to be tired, but at the same time, sometimes that bye week can really set you back a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how an A&M performs, but I think I'll take the Aggies at home.
And watch out for the speedy freshman Christian Kirk. He is leading the SEC in almost all the all-purpose yards, both in kick returns and receiving. He is a crazy kid. Could be up for Heisman if he keeps putting these numbers up.
My game of the week is the number 8 Florida Gators against number 6 LSU Tigers. Because Florida Gators without their quarterback, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. And then LSU, this is a big game for the Tigers. It is in Baton Rouge. They did play last week against South Carolina because of the flooding. The game was originally supposed to be in South Carolina, but because of the flooding, they had to move it to Baton Rouge. But what a class act. LSU hoisted the South Carolina flag over Death Valley, and just what a class act by the LSU Tigers. But I go with the Tigers this week. And then my other game to watch out for is potential upset, the number 3 TCU Horned Frogs against Iowa State. This is an upset to watch out for. This is in Ames, Iowa at Jack Trice Stadium, because Iowa State is a team known for upsetting Big 12 teams in the past. So with TCU potentially almost losing 2 weeks in a row to Tech and Kansas State, like you talked, Maddie, it's going to be a tight one. So with that, we're going to turn our attention to Maddie for her game of the week.
Game of the week, look out for Michigan State versus number 12, Michigan.
College game day will be in Ann Arbor for the Michigan and Michigan State game. Michigan is actually favored in this game just because of their point differential for the past 4 or 5 games. So we're going to turn our attention to NFL Week 6. All right, our games of the week. Mine is the Detroit Lions at 0-5 are hosting the Chicago Bears. Just because the Detroit Lions are 0-5, they need a win. This is a team that lost a lot of key players, but importantly, they need to find a win and just get that sense of sustainability where they know they can win. Because with the 0-6 Detroit Lions, it just makes for a bad football team.
My game of the week will be the Sunday night football game, the Patriots at the Colts. I think this is a big game in multiple reasons. One, for the Colts, is Andrew Luck coming back, or will they have to deal with the veteran Hasselbeck yet another week? I think Luck will be back, though, just because of how big this game is, and he has had a few more weeks off than what both he and the team anticipated. And will the Patriots stay hot? This offense is on fire, on pace to even possibly break the Broncos' offensive records that they held just 2 years ago. So that'll definitely be my game of the week, Sunday Night Football.
Maddie Panazzo, what is your NFL game of the week?
I'd have to say my game of the week is the Carolina Panthers playing the Seattle Seahawks coming up this Sunday, obviously. But Carolina's undefeated, and I just want to see what Seattle has to bring, even though a lot of people wouldn't say they're big fans of them right now.
All right, last segment of the show is where we tell you our last segment of the show is where we tell you who we think it will be the sleeper pick of the week for fantasy football. So, Sean McFarland, who do you got for this week?
I'm going to go with Shane Vereen, a running back for the New York Giants. Even though the Giants have been doing really well lately, their wide receiver core is getting a little banged up. And what does Eli Manning like? Those little drop passes to Shane Vereen coming out the backfield. He put up 23 points in my league, just racking up both the rushing and receiving yards. And I think he's going to be doing a great job this coming up week for the Giants.
All right, my fantasy player of the week is Derek Carr, quarterback of the Raiders. I think he's been successful and with his targets for Amari Cooper. I think that the Raiders are really a sleeper pick as far as offense overall. That's going to do it for us at the Sportsic. For Sean McFarland, Maddie Panazzo, myself, Cameron Buntrey, thank you so much. And make sure to tune in to Sportsic and follow us on Twitter, Fix_Sports. We'll catch you next week here on the Sports Fix.